The turbulence over the Atlantic had finally subsided when I made the decision that would change everything. 3 weeks into what was supposed to be a month-long consulting project in Berlin, I sat in my hotel room staring at the contract extension my client had just emailed. Another 2 weeks in Germany, double pay, all expenses covered. 6 months ago, I would have signed without hesitation. But 6 months ago, I hadn't been married to Daniel. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I pulled up my phone, scrolling through our text messages. His responses over the past week had grown shorter, more distant. Busy day at the firm had replaced his usual paragraphs about his cases. Miss you too had become just miss you. The emoji hearts had disappeared entirely. Maybe he was just stressed. His law firm had been understaffed since Marcus left, and Daniel had been pulling 70-hour weeks trying to cover the gap. Or maybe, I thought with a flutter of excitement, he was planning something for my return. Our first anniversary was in 2 weeks. I opened my laptop and pulled up the airline website. The cursor hovered over the Modify Booking button. My original return flight was scheduled for next Friday, but I could be home by tomorrow night if I caught the morning flight from Berlin to JFK. The idea formed slowly, like dawn breaking over the Brandenburg Gate I could see from my window. A surprise. I would come home early, cook his favorite meal, be there when he walked through the door exhausted from another long day. We could spend a whole week together before I had to leave for my next project in Singapore. I clicked the button before I could overthink it. The change fee was astronomical, but the expression on Daniel's face would be worth every penny. I imagined him dropping his briefcase in shock, sweeping me into his arms the way he had on our wedding day. The way he used to before my travel schedule became relentless. My phone buzzed with a text from my colleague Eva. Signing the extension? Hans is desperate to keep you another 2 weeks. I typed back quickly. Already changed my flight home. Family comes first. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, lucky husband. Mine would celebrate if I extended. I smiled, thinking about how different Daniel was from Eva's husband. Daniel understood my career, supported my ambitions. He'd been the one who encouraged me to take this Berlin contract, even though it meant missing his birthday. He'd even helped me pack, folding my clothes with the same meticulous attention he brought to his legal briefs. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of packing and logistics. I settled my hotel bill at dawn, my mind already home. The taxi driver who took me to Tegel Airport tried to practice his English, but I barely heard him. I was mentally planning the homecoming dinner, reviewing what would be in our fridge versus what I'd need to pick up. The flight itself was torture. 7 hours of recycled air and terrible movies while I counted down the minutes. I'd turned off my phone's international plan, wanting to save the surprise. No warning texts, no heads up. Just me walking through our door in Brooklyn Heights 24 hours early. JFK Customs moved with agonizing slowness. I shifted from foot to foot in the line, my carry-on feeling heavier with each passing minute. Finally, I was through and heading toward the taxi stand. Brooklyn Heights, I told the driver, rattling off our address. The brownstone Daniel had fallen in love with 3 years ago, before we were even engaged. Back when I was still living in a studio in Queens and he was a junior associate working 100-hour weeks. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The familiar streets of our neighborhood made my heart race. There was the coffee shop where Daniel proposed, getting down on one knee right in front of the espresso machine while I was ordering my usual oat milk latte. The park where we'd had our first date, an impromptu picnic that turned into a 6-hour conversation about everything and nothing. Our brownstone came into view, the red brick facade glowing in the late afternoon sun. Daniel's car was in the driveway. My pulse quickened. He was home early. Maybe he was sick? Concern flickered through my excitement. I paid the driver and stood for a moment on the sidewalk, drinking in the sight of home. The window boxes I'd planted before leaving were blooming with late summer flowers, which meant Daniel had been watering them. The thought made me smile. He'd killed every plant I'd ever given him before we moved in together. The front steps felt solid under my feet as I climbed them, fishing my keys from my purse. I'd been so focused on the surprise that I hadn't considered the practical reality of just walking in. Should I knock? Ring the bell? No, that would ruin it. I wanted to see his face the moment he realized I was home. I slid my key into the lock as quietly as possible. The mechanism turned smoothly, and I eased the door open, stepping into the cool darkness of our entryway. The house smelled different. Not bad, just different. A woman's perfume I didn't recognize, mixed with something cooking in the kitchen. My stomach dropped. Daniel didn't cook. In our entire relationship, I'd seen him make exactly 3 things: scrambled eggs, grilled cheese, and reservation calls to restaurants. I set down my suitcase carefully, my lawyer's instincts kicking in. Observe first, react second. The living room was to my right, and I could hear music playing softly. Not Daniel's usual jazz, but pop music. Taylor Swift. Daniel hated Taylor Swift. My feet moved silently across the hardwood floor we'd refinished together last spring. Each step felt like wading through water. The kitchen was straight ahead, and through the doorway I could see movement. 2 figures. I stopped breathing. Daniel stood at the stove, wearing the apron I'd given him as a joke last Christmas. The one that said "kiss the cook" with little hearts around it. He was stirring something in a pot, laughing at something the woman beside him had said. The woman. Tall, blonde, wearing one of Daniel's button-down shirts and apparently nothing else. Her legs were bare, her feet in the fuzzy slippers I kept by the back door for when I worked in the garden. My slippers. She reached up to adjust his collar, and he caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. The gesture was so casual, so intimate, so practiced that it made my knees weak. "You're going to burn the risotto," she said, her voice carrying that particular warmth that comes from familiarity. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time thing. "Then distract me less," Daniel replied, and kissed her. Not a peck, not a friendly gesture. A real kiss, deep and thorough, the kind that made her lean into him and wrap her arms around his neck. I must have made a sound. Some small, broken noise that I didn't consciously produce. Because they pulled apart, and Daniel's eyes met mine across the length of our home. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might pass out. Natalie. My name sounded foreign in his mouth. Like he'd forgotten how to say it. Like I was the stranger in this kitchen, not the blonde wearing his clothes in our house. "You're not supposed to be home until Friday," he said, and the sheer stupidity of that statement almost made me laugh. Almost. Surprise. I heard myself say, though my voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Everything felt underwater. Distant and muffled and wrong. The woman had the decency to look uncomfortable, tugging at the hem of Daniel's shirt. "I should go." "Yes," I said, finding my voice, finding some core of steel I didn't know I possessed. "You really should." She moved toward me to get to the front door, and I stepped aside, pressing myself against the wall. I couldn't touch her. If I touched her, if I got too close, I might shatter. Or worse, I might do something I couldn't take back. Daniel didn't move to stop her. Didn't introduce us. Didn't explain. He just stood there in his ridiculous apron, the wooden spoon still in his hand, watching his entire life implode. The front door opened and closed. We were alone. "Natalie, I can explain," he started, and that's when I did laugh, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised us both. "Can you?" I moved into the kitchen properly now, seeing all the details I'd missed in my initial shock. 2 wine glasses on the counter, both half empty. Candles waiting to be lit. The good china, the set his mother had given us as a wedding present. Because I'd love to hear the explanation for why there's another woman cooking in our kitchen. "Wearing your clothes and my slippers. It's not what you think." "Don't." I held up my hand, stopping him. "Don't insult me by saying it's not what I think. I'm a litigator, Daniel. I'm trained to assess evidence. And the evidence is pretty damn clear." He set down the spoon with a clatter. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." I leaned against the counter, needing its support. Who is she? Emma! The name came out reluctantly. She works at the firm. Of course she did. The understaffing at his firm suddenly made perfect sense. How long? Nat, please. How long, Daniel? He closed his eyes. 3 months. 3 months. The room tilted. 3 months meant this started before I left for Berlin. 3 months meant every loving text, every I miss you, every can't wait until you're home had been a lie. 3 months meant our anniversary was already dead before it arrived. 3 months, I repeated, testing the words. They tasted like ash. So when you helped me pack for Berlin, you were already sleeping with her. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Things don't just happen, Daniel. People make choices. I pushed off the counter, suddenly unable to stand still. You made a choice. Multiple choices. Every day for 3 months, you chose to lie to me. To text me goodnight while you were probably lying next to her. To let me think we were okay when we clearly weren't. We weren't okay long before Emma. His voice rose, frustration bleeding through. You're never here, Natalie. Do you know how many dinners I've eaten alone in the past year? How many weekends I've spent by myself while you were in London or Tokyo or wherever else your career took you? So this is my fault? The anger came then, hot and clarifying. I'm working too much, so you decided to have an affair. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing. Now it just looked like manipulation. I'm saying we grew apart. You chose your career over our marriage. I chose to have both. You're the one who apparently decided I couldn't. I grabbed my purse from where I'd dropped it. I need to leave before I say something I can't take back. Where are you going? I laughed again, that same bitter sound. Anywhere but here. This is your house now, Daniel. Yours and Emma's. Enjoy the risotto. Natalie, wait. We should talk about this. Figure out what we're doing. I stopped at the kitchen doorway, looking back at the man I'd married. He looked small suddenly, diminished. Or maybe he'd always been this small, and I'd just been too busy seeing what I wanted to see. What we're doing, I repeated softly. We're getting divorced, Daniel. That's what we're doing. His face crumpled. Don't say that. Please, we can work through this. Work through what? Your 3-month affair? Your complete betrayal of everything we promised each other? I shook my head. I canceled a lucrative contract extension to come home early and surprise you. I was going to cook you dinner. Tell you how much I missed you. Maybe even suggest we start trying for a baby. The baby comment hit him visibly. We'd been talking about starting a family before I left for Berlin. He'd been the one pushing for it, actually. Now I understood why. Guilt, probably. Trying to fix something he'd already broken. I didn't know, he whispered. No, you didn't. Because I wanted to surprise you. I picked up my suitcase from where I'd left it by the door. It was still packed, still tagged with the Lufthansa stickers from my flight. Mission accomplished. Where are you going to go? He followed me to the door, desperation in his voice now. All your things are here. I'll send someone for them. A lawyer, probably, since you're so familiar with those. I opened the door, breathing in the evening air. It smelled like freedom, like possibility, like the end of something that should have ended long ago. Tell Emma she can have my slippers. She seemed to like them. Natalie, please. But I was already down the steps, already walking toward the street, already putting distance between myself and the life I thought I had. My phone was in my hand, my fingers moving automatically to pull up a rideshare app when I stopped. Where was I going? My best friend Rachel lived in Manhattan, but she was in London on business. My parents were in Florida, retired and blissfully unaware that their daughter's marriage was imploding. My brother was in California with his wife and new baby. I was alone in a city of millions, with nowhere to go and no one to call. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the past year traveling constantly, living out of hotels, making small talk with strangers in airport lounges. I was an expert at being alone. But this was different. This was loneliness, sharp and immediate, cutting through the numbness like a knife. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. I'm sorry. Please come back so we can talk. I blocked his number and called the one person I knew would answer. No matter what time it was. Natalie Chen, as I live and breathe, my colleague Marcus answered on the second ring. Aren't you supposed to be charming German executives right now? Marcus, who'd left Daniel's firm 6 months ago to start his own practice, who'd been my mentor when I was starting out, before either of us knew I'd end up married to his former colleague, who'd always treated me like a little sister, protective and honest and occasionally annoying. I need a favor, I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. Where are you? Brooklyn Heights. Outside my house? Or what used to be my house? The words came out in a rush now, the shock wearing off, reality setting in. Daniel's having an affair. I came home early to surprise him and found him with her. In our kitchen. Cooking dinner. She was wearing his shirt and my slippers, Marcus. My slippers. Son of a bitch. I heard movement on his end, keys jangling. Don't move. I'm coming to get you. You don't have to, Natalie. Don't move, he hung up. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching the sun set over Brooklyn, my suitcase beside me like a faithful companion. Neighbors walked by, some with dogs, some with children, all immersed in their own lives, their own dramas. No one looked at me twice. I was just another person on a street corner, waiting. 20 minutes later, Marcus pulled up in his black Tesla, the window rolling down to reveal his concerned face. He looked the same as always, expensive suit slightly rumpled, tie loosened, salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. He was 45 to my 32, with the kind of confidence that came from winning impossible cases and not taking life too seriously. Get in, he said unnecessarily. I was already opening the door. He didn't speak until we were moving, merging into traffic, putting distance between me and the brownstone. Then quietly, tell me what happened, so I did. The whole story spilled out. The contract extension I'd declined, the surprise homecoming, the woman in my kitchen, Daniel's pathetic excuses. Marcus listened without interrupting, his jaw growing tighter with each detail. 3 months, he said finally, his voice hard. That spineless bastard looked me in the eye at the Bar Association dinner 2 weeks ago and talked about how proud he was of you. How he was holding down the fort while you conquered Europe. Apparently he was holding down more than the fort. Marcus shot me a look. Humor, that's good. Means you're not in complete shock. Oh, I'm definitely in shock. I just process trauma through sarcasm. I know. I was there when you lost the Anderson case and made that joke about career counseling. He turned onto the highway, heading toward Manhattan. Where do you want to go? Hotel? My place has a guest room if you need it. Hotel, I think. I need space to think. I paused, reality crashing in again. Oh God, Marcus. I turned down the Berlin extension. Hans is going to be furious. Hans will survive. You're his best consultant. He'll hold your spot. Marcus glanced at me. But Natalie, you need to think about what comes next. Not the job. The marriage. There is no marriage. Not anymore. You might want to wait before making permanent decisions. Give yourself time to process. I looked at him sharply. Are you seriously suggesting I might forgive this? I'm suggesting you don't make life-altering decisions while standing on a street corner in shock. His voice gentled. I've known you for 8 years, Nat. You're brilliant in the courtroom because you never act on emotion. You gather evidence, build your case, execute your strategy. Do the same thing now. He was right, of course. That's what made it so infuriating. I wanted to burn everything down, file for divorce tomorrow, salt the earth where my marriage had stood. But that wasn't smart. That was emotional, and emotions made you vulnerable. Fine, I said. But I want him to hurt. I want him to understand what he threw away. Marcus smiled, and there was something predatory in it. Something that reminded me why he'd been so successful as a litigator before starting his own firm. Now you're thinking like a lawyer. Tell me, does Daniel know you're the sole owner of that brownstone? I blinked. What? The house. It's in your name only, right? From before you got married? Yes, but we've been renovating together. He's put money into it. Improvements to a non-marital asset generally don't create ownership rights unless there's a clear agreement. And New York isn't a community property state. Marcus's smile widened. Did you two sign a post-nuptial agreement after the wedding? No. Daniel kept saying we should, but we never got around to it. Interesting. Very interesting. He pulled up to a boutique hotel in Midtown, the kind of place that catered to business travelers who needed privacy and discretion. Let me handle check-in. You've had enough for one day. I waited in the car while he arranged everything, my mind spinning. The house was mine. Legally, completely mine. Daniel had been living there, but he had no claim to it. None of our renovations would matter unless he could prove we'd had an agreement about shared ownership. We hadn't, because I'd trusted him. Because we were married, and married couples didn't need contracts to protect themselves from each other. Except clearly they did. Marcus returned with a key card and helped me with my suitcase. The room was on the 15th floor, spacious and impersonal. Perfect. Order room service, he instructed. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll start building your case. Case for what? For whatever you decide you want, Natalie. Divorce, reconciliation, revenge. Whatever it is, we'll make sure you're the one in control. He paused at the door. And Nat? I'm sorry. Daniel's an idiot. You deserved better. After he left, I stood in the center of the hotel room, finally alone with my thoughts. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something colder, clearer. Daniel had betrayed me, but he'd also underestimated me. Thought I'd come home, cry, maybe, leave for a few days, then come back for a tearful reconciliation. He didn't understand that the woman he'd married wasn't the same woman standing in this hotel room. I'd changed over the past year of constant travel and high-stakes negotiations. I'd learned to read people, to see beneath what they wanted me to see. I'd learned that the quietest person in the room was often the most dangerous. Daniel was about to learn that lesson the hard way. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "Evidence and strategy." Then I started writing. Every detail I could remember about our finances. The house deed, solely in my name. The joint bank accounts we'd opened, with deposits primarily from my substantially higher salary. The credit cards, most in my name because my credit score was better. The car, titled to me because I'd bought it before we married. Pattern after pattern emerged. Daniel had been living a life funded largely by my income, in a house I owned, driving a car registered to me. And now he'd thrown it away for a woman who cooked risotto and wore borrowed shirts. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "It's Emma. Daniel gave me your number. I'm so sorry. I didn't know the extent of things. He told me you two were separated." I stared at the message for a long moment. The anger that surged through me was so intense I had to set the phone down before I threw it across the room. Separated. He'd told her we were separated. That meant this wasn't just an affair born of loneliness or opportunity. This was calculated, premeditated. He'd been building a narrative, creating a story where he was the victim of a cold, career-focused wife who'd abandoned him. Where his affair was justified, even understandable. I picked up the phone and typed back. We were not separated. We were married. Happily, I thought. Until 3 hours ago when I came home early from a business trip to surprise him and found you in my kitchen, wearing his clothes, cooking dinner. But thank you for the apology. I'm sure it makes you feel better about sleeping with someone else's husband. I hit send before I could reconsider, then blocked the number too. My laptop screen glowed in the darkening room. I looked at the document. I'd started all those careful notes about assets and evidence. Marcus was right about not making permanent decisions while in shock. But he was wrong about one thing. I wasn't in shock anymore. I was getting angry. And angry. I was unstoppable. I opened my email and found the message from Hans about the contract extension. The offer was still there, waiting for my signature. 2 more weeks in Berlin, plus a potential expansion to oversee their Munich office. 6 months, maybe more. Far away from Brooklyn and brownstones and lying husbands. I could run. take the contract, bury myself in work, process the divorce from an ocean away, or I could stay, fight, make Daniel understand exactly what he'd lost. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. In the reflection of the screen, I saw my own face, tired, betrayed, but determined. I thought about that morning, packing my bags in Berlin, excited to come home. Thought about the naive woman who'd stood on the sidewalk outside her own house, waiting for a man who would never come. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder. Someone who'd learned that trust was a liability and love was a weapon people used against you. But also someone who understood power, who knew how to strategize, to plan, to execute, who'd spent years in courtrooms watching people try to manipulate the system and had learned every trick they'd tried. I started typing a new email, not to Hans, to my firm's managing partner, requesting an emergency leave of absence for personal matters. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Enough time to secure my assets, file for divorce, and ensure Daniel's affair became public knowledge among every lawyer in New York. If he wanted to work at a law firm in this city, he'd do it with everyone knowing exactly what kind of man he was. The email sent. Then I opened a new message, this time to a private investigator I'd worked with on a case last year. Someone discreet, thorough, and expensive. I need surveillance on my husband, I wrote. 3 months of his life documented and verified. Phone records, credit card statements, travel history, everything. I need to know every lie he's told and every moment he's spent with her. Because Marcus was right about one thing. I needed to think like a lawyer. Gather evidence, build my case, strike when the target was most vulnerable. Daniel thought this was over, thought the hard part was done, the secret revealed, the worst behind us. He had no idea the worst was just beginning. I closed my laptop and moved to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there, in that brownstone in Brooklyn, Daniel was probably cleaning up the dinner he'd been making for another woman, maybe calling Emma, assuring her everything would be fine, maybe convincing himself that this was somehow my fault, that I'd driven him to this with my career and my travel and my ambition. Let him think that. Let him feel justified. Because soon, very soon, he'd understand the cost of underestimating the woman he'd married. The woman who'd built her career on reading people, on strategy, on never showing her hand until she was ready to strike. The woman who was about to make his life very, very complicated. My phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. Another message getting through somehow. But this time it wasn't Emma or Daniel. It was Rachel, my best friend who was supposed to be in London. Just landed at JFK. Marcus called. Coming to you now. Don't you dare tell me you're fine. I smiled for the first time since walking through my front door. Maybe I wasn't completely alone after all. And maybe, just maybe, that made me more dangerous than Daniel could possibly imagine. Rachel burst into my hotel room at midnight, carrying 3 bottles of wine, a box of tissues, and a bag from the 24-hour deli down the street. Her red hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she was still wearing the Chanel suit she'd probably put on that morning in London. I took the first flight I could get, she said, setting everything down and pulling me into a fierce hug. Marcus told me everything. I'm going to kill him. I'm actually going to kill Daniel Morrison. Get in line, I replied, my voice muffled against her shoulder. She pulled back, studying my face with the intensity that made her one of the top mergers and acquisitions lawyers in the city. You're not crying, I cried in the shower. Now I'm past crying. That's either very healthy or deeply concerning. She opened one of the wine bottles, not bothering with glasses, and handed it to me. Drink, then tell me the plan. The plan? Natalie, I've known you since law school. You always have a plan. She settled onto the bed, kicking off her heels. So what is it? Slash his tires? Max out his credit cards? Post his dating profile on every revenge website. Nothing that actionable. I took a swig of wine directly from the bottle. I'm thinking more. Strategic. Rachel's eyes lit up. Now we're talking. What are we strategizing? I pulled out my laptop and showed her the document I'd started. She read in silence, her expression growing more focused with each line. When she finished, she looked at me with something like respect. You're going nuclear. He deserves nuclear. Yes, but Nat, you need to be sure. Once you start down this path, there's no coming back. No reconciliation, no second chances. I don't want second chances with a man who spent 3 months lying to my face. I set down the wine bottle with more force than necessary. He told Emma we were separated, Rachel. He wasn't just cheating. He was creating an entire false narrative. Emma. Rachel's lip curled. That's the woman? Emma from his firm. Tall, blonde, apparently comfortable wearing other people's husbands and slippers. Did you get a good look at her? Good enough. Rachel pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Emma what? What's her last name? I don't know. I was too busy processing my husband's infidelity to ask for her LinkedIn profile. Found her. Rachel turned the phone toward me. Emma Westbrook, junior associate at Morrison & Klein. Started 8 months ago. She scrolled through the profile. Columbia Law, graduated 3 years ago. Worked at a firm in Boston before moving here. I looked at the professional headshot. Emma Westbrook smiled confidently at the camera, blonde hair perfect, teeth white, everything about her screaming competent young professional. She looked nothing like me, where I was petite and dark-haired. With features that betrayed my Chinese heritage, Emma was tall and Nordic and conventionally beautiful. She's a baby, Rachel observed. 26, maybe 27? Daniel always said he wasn't attracted to younger women. The bitterness in my voice surprised me. Daniel says a lot of things. Rachel set down her phone. Okay, first things first. We need to secure your assets. Marcus was right about the house, but what about joint accounts? We have 2. 1 checking, 1 savings. I've been depositing most of my salary into them. How much are we talking? I pulled up my banking app. About $200,000 in savings, $30,000 in checking. Rachel whistled. That's not community property. That's your money earned during the marriage. New York is an equitable distribution state, which means the court divides marital assets fairly, not necessarily equally. Meaning? Meaning if you earned it, you have a strong argument to keep most of it. Especially since Daniel was using marital funds to wine and dine his mistress. She grabbed my laptop. We need to document every penny. Every dinner he claimed was a business expense. Every hotel charge. Every suspicious withdrawal. We worked through the night, combing through bank statements and credit card bills. Rachel was relentless, highlighting every transaction that looked suspicious. Dinner for 2 at expensive restaurants, charges at a boutique hotel in Manhattan, multiple purchases at a jewelry store I'd never received gifts from. He's been sloppy, Rachel said around 3 a.m, her 4th coffee cup empty beside her. Look at this. Valentine's Day, charges at Tiffany's for $1,500. Did you get anything? I shook my head. He said he was too busy with work to do anything special. We ordered Thai food and watched Netflix. Son of a bitch, she highlighted the transaction. That necklace was for Emma, the evidence piled up. Months of lies, captured in credit card statements and bank withdrawals. Daniel hadn't even been smart about it. He'd used our joint credit card, probably thinking I was too busy traveling to notice or care. He'd been wrong on both counts. By dawn, we had a comprehensive file of suspicious transactions totaling over $30,000. Rachel leaned back, stretching. This is good. Really good. Any divorce attorney would salivate over this. I don't want just any divorce attorney. I closed the laptop, my eyes burning from lack of sleep and screen time. I want the best. Then you want Victoria Chen. Rachel grinned at my expression. Yes, that Victoria Chen. The one who took down that tech CEO in the messiest divorce of the decade. She's brutal, expensive, and she doesn't lose. She's also booked years in advance. For normal people, yes. But you're not normal people. You're a successful international consultant, and I happen to know Victoria's nephew through my work. I can get you a meeting. I looked at my best friend, disheveled and exhausted, who'd flown across an ocean to sit with me through the worst night of my life. Thank you. Thank me by letting me be there when Daniel realizes what he's lost. She stood, gathering her things. I need to go home and shower. But Nat, be careful. Don't do anything rash before we have all our pieces in place. After she left, I tried to sleep but couldn't. My mind kept circling back to that moment in the kitchen. Daniel's face when he saw me, the casual intimacy between him and Emma, the way he'd kissed her like it was routine, comfortable, theirs. My phone buzzed. A text from an unrecognized number managed to get through. This is Daniel's mother. He told me what happened. I'm so disappointed in you for abandoning my son during such a difficult time in his career. I stared at the message, rage building in my chest. He'd told his mother already, spun the story his way. Made me the villain, I typed back. Your son has been having an affair for 3 months. I came home early from a business trip to surprise him and found him with another woman in our kitchen. But I'm glad to know where his talent for rewriting reality comes from. I blocked the number before she could respond. The private investigator I'd contacted emailed back within the hour. His name was David Torres, and his rates were astronomical, but his results were guaranteed. We arranged to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop in Midtown. I forced myself to shower and change into fresh clothes from my suitcase. The woman in the mirror looked hollow-eyed but determined. I applied makeup carefully, armor for the day ahead. David Torres turned out to be nothing like I expected. Instead of the rumpled detective from movies, he was young, polished, and carried an iPad instead of a notepad. We sat in a back corner of the coffee shop, far from other customers. I've already started preliminary research, he said without preamble. Your husband has been careless. Multiple witnesses place him and Emma Westbrook at restaurants and hotels throughout Manhattan. They haven't been subtle. How long will it take to compile everything? For a comprehensive report? 2 weeks, maybe 3, but I can have initial documentation by the end of this week. He swiped through his iPad. Phone records will be the challenge. I'll need you to provide his number and carrier information. I gave him everything. Phone numbers, email addresses, credit card numbers, Daniel's social security number, every piece of information that would help build the case against him. One more thing, David said as we were finishing. I found some interesting financial transactions. Your husband has been moving money from your joint savings account to a separate account. Small amounts, spread out over time. Did you authorize these transfers? My blood ran cold. No. Then we may be looking at financial fraud in addition to infidelity. He made a note. I'll document everything. But Ms. Chen, you should freeze those accounts immediately. I called the bank from the coffee shop. The representative was sympathetic but firm. I couldn't freeze joint accounts without Daniel's consent or a court order. Then I want to withdraw my contributions, I said. I can prove which deposits came from my income. You can withdraw 50% of the current balance without the other account holder's signature. I did the math quickly. 50% would leave Daniel with access to money that was largely mine, but it would also protect half of it. Do it. Transfer 50% of the savings and checking accounts to my personal account. That will be processed within 24 hours. When I hung up, I felt lighter. $100,000 secured. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Rachel texted me around noon. Victoria Chen can see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Don't be late. She hates late. I spent the rest of the day working from the hotel room, trying to focus on actual client work and failing miserably. Every few minutes I'd find myself checking my phone, waiting for Daniel to reach out. To apologize, to explain, to do something that would make sense of the past 24 hours. He didn't. Marcus called around 5. How are you holding up? I've secured half our savings, hired a private investigator, and have a meeting with Victoria Chen tomorrow morning. So, keeping busy. That's my girl. I could hear the smile in his voice. Listen, I did some digging at the firm. Daniel's been telling people you two have been having problems for months. That you're never home. That the marriage has been over for a while. Of course he has. But here's the interesting part. Emma apparently transferred from the Boston office specifically to work with Daniel. They knew each other before. I sat up straighter. What? They went to law school together. She was 2 years behind him, but they were both at NYU. I'm betting this relationship predates her transfer by quite a bit. How far back are we talking? That's what David Torres needs to find out. But Natalie, if they had a prior relationship and she transferred here to be with him, that changes the narrative significantly. It also meant Daniel had been planning this, actively pursuing it. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was calculated. I need to know everything, I said. Every connection, every communication, every time they've been in the same place. David's good. He'll find it. Marcus paused. Are you sure you want to know? Sometimes ignorance is easier, I'm sure. I need to understand exactly who I married. That evening, I ordered room service and tried to work on a presentation for a client. My laptop kept drawing me back to social media, though. Emma's Instagram was public, filled with carefully curated photos of brunches and sunsets and inspirational quotes. I scrolled back months, looking for any trace of Daniel. There. 3 months ago, right when their affair supposedly started. A photo of a wine glass against a city backdrop captioned, New Beginnings. The location tag was a bar 2 blocks from Daniel's office. I kept scrolling. More photos, more cryptic captions. Sometimes the universe has a plan. Everything happens for a reason. Following my heart. The kind of vague, inspirational nonsense that meant everything and nothing. But to me, reading them now, they were a chronicle of her affair with my husband. I screenshotted every single one. My phone rang. Rachel. Have you eaten? Room service. Good. Don't get drunk and call Daniel. I wasn't planning to. Natalie. I know you. You're going to want closure or answers or some kind of explanation that makes sense. Don't! Let Victoria handle it. She was right, of course. The urge to call Daniel, to demand answers, to understand why was overwhelming. But that would show weakness. Would give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd hurt me. Better to let him wonder. Let him worry. Let him realize that the woman he'd underestimated was more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. I spent the evening preparing for my meeting with Victoria Chen. I compiled every piece of evidence into a single file. Bank statements, credit card bills, screenshots from Emma's social media, documentation of the house ownership, records of my income versus Daniel's. Everything a divorce attorney could need to build an airtight case. At midnight, my phone buzzed with an email. David Torres, already delivering preliminary findings. Subject, initial report, Daniel Morrison. Ms. Chen, preliminary surveillance has revealed the following. Subject and Emma Westbrook have been observed together on 12 separate occasions over the past 72 hours, including overnight stays at her apartment in Chelsea. Phone records show over 3,000 text messages exchanged between Subject and Ms. Westbrook over the past 3 months. Credit card analysis reveals Subject used joint marital funds for the following. Jewelry purchases, $15,873. Restaurant charges, $8,342. Hotel stays, $4,200. And various gifts, $3,127. Additional finding. Subject and Ms. Westbrook attended NYU Law School together. Subject served as Ms. Westbrook's teaching assistant during her first year. Social media analysis suggests they maintained contact after graduation. Full report will be completed by next Friday. DT. I read the email 3 times, each detail landing like a punch. Teaching assistant? That meant Daniel had been in a position of authority over Emma when they first met. That added a whole new dimension to their relationship. It also meant he'd been lying about how they met for 3 months. She works at the firm suddenly sounded a lot less like a random affair and a lot more like a reunion of old flames. I forwarded the email to Rachel and Marcus, then started a new document titled Timeline. If Daniel and Emma had a history, I needed to map it out. Every connection, every meeting, every lie. The next morning, I dressed in my most expensive suit. Armani, black, tailored to perfection. I did my makeup flawlessly, my hair in a sleek bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not the heartbroken wife, but the successful lawyer who'd built her career on being underestimated. Victoria Chen's office was in a glass tower, overlooking Central Park. The reception area was all modern art and expensive furniture. I gave my name to the receptionist, who smiled professionally and offered me coffee. "Ms. Chen will see you now," she said after exactly 1 minute. Punctuality. I appreciated that. Victoria Chen's office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist decor. The woman herself was in her 50s, perfectly put together in a way that suggested she'd never had a hair out of place in her life. She stood when I entered, extending a hand. "Ms. Chen. Though I suppose I should call you Natalie to avoid confusion." Her smile was sharp. "Rachel speaks very highly of you. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." Rachel indicated it was urgent. "Infidelity usually is." She gestured to a chair. "Tell me everything. Leave nothing out. I can't help you if I don't know what I'm working with." So I told her. Every detail, from coming home early to finding Emma in my kitchen to the evidence I'd already gathered. Victoria listened without interrupting, making occasional notes on her tablet. When I finished, she sat back, studying me. "You've done excellent preliminary work. The financial documentation alone gives us significant leverage. But I need to know something before we proceed." "What do you want?" "I want a divorce, obviously. But what else? Revenge? Maximum financial compensation? To destroy his reputation?" Different goals require different strategies. I thought about Daniel, probably at work right now, convincing himself he was the victim in all this. Thought about Emma, young and idealistic, believing she'd won some great prize. Thought about the life I'd built, the home I'd made, the future I'd planned, all destroyed by their selfishness. "I want him to understand what he threw away," I said slowly. "And I want to ensure he can never do this to anyone else." Victoria smiled, and it was predatory. "Then let's begin." Victoria Chen didn't waste time. Within 48 hours of our meeting, she'd filed for divorce, requested a temporary restraining order preventing Daniel from accessing our joint accounts, and scheduled an emergency hearing to address the disposition of marital assets. "He's going to panic," she said during our strategy session in her office. "Men like Daniel always do when they lose control of the narrative. That's when they make mistakes." She was right. The papers were served to Daniel at his office on a Thursday afternoon. I know because David Torres had someone watching. According to the report, Daniel's face went white when he opened the envelope. He immediately called someone, probably Emma, and left work early. By that evening, my phone was flooded with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. His friends, his mother, even his sister who I'd always gotten along with. All of them begging me to reconsider, to think about what I was throwing away, to remember that marriage takes work. I blocked every single one. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Victoria spent the weekend preparing, going through every piece of evidence with surgical precision. The financial records, the private investigator's preliminary report, documentation of the house ownership, everything organized into a presentation that would make Daniel's infidelity impossible to deny. "What about Emma?" I asked during one of our prep sessions. "Can we go after her too?" Victoria gave me a measured look. "Legally? No. New York abolished alienation of affection lawsuits. But professionally? That's different. If we can prove she knew Daniel was married and pursued the relationship anyway, it could impact her career at the firm." She knew. Daniel told her we were separated, but she had to know that was a lie. "We're connected on LinkedIn. Our relationship status was public until 2 days ago." "Then we document that too." Victoria made a note. "Everything goes in the file." Monday morning arrived cold and gray, matching my mood perfectly. I dressed in navy blue, conservative and professional. Rachel met me outside the courthouse, holding 2 coffees. "You ready for this?" she asked. "I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice, Nat. You could still walk away, take the high road, settle quietly." I thought about Daniel's face when he saw me in our kitchen. The casual intimacy with Emma, the months of lies. The high road is overrated. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. Daniel was already there with his attorney, a middle-aged man named Richard Klein, who I recognized from legal circles. Daniel looked terrible, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. When he saw me, he stood up like he wanted to approach, but Victoria stepped between us. "No contact," she said firmly. "All communication goes through counsel." The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She reviewed the preliminary motions quickly, then looked up at both sides. "This is a request for temporary orders regarding marital assets," she said. "Ms. Chen, you're seeking to prevent Mr. Morrison from accessing joint accounts and to establish temporary exclusive use of the marital residence. On what grounds?" Victoria stood. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Morrison has been systematically depleting marital assets to fund an extramarital affair. We also have documentation showing the residence in question is solely owned by Ms. Chen, purchased before the marriage, and therefore not subject to equitable distribution." "Your Honor, that's not accurate," Richard Klein interjected. "Mr. Morrison has made substantial improvements to the property during the marriage." "Improvements funded by my client's income," Victoria countered smoothly. "We have bank records showing that over 70% of household expenses have been paid from accounts funded solely by Ms. Chen's salary, which substantially exceeds Mr. Morrison's." The judge held up a hand. "I'll review the financial documentation. What else?" "We're also requesting that the court order Mr. Morrison to account for approximately $30,000 in suspicious charges made to joint credit cards over the past 3 months. Charges that appear to be directly related to his relationship with a coworker, Emma Westbrook." I watched Daniel's face crumble as Victoria laid out the evidence. Every dinner, every hotel stay, every piece of jewelry he'd bought for Emma with our money. Richard Klein tried to object, but the documentation was irrefutable. The judge reviewed the files in silence. When she finally looked up, her expression was stern. "Mr. Morrison, did you use marital funds to conduct an extramarital affair?" Daniel stood slowly. "Your Honor, my marriage was already in trouble. My wife is never home. I was lonely, and that's not what I asked." "Did you use marital funds?" "Yes, but—" "Thank you." The judge made several notes. "I'm granting the temporary restraining order on the joint accounts. Mr. Morrison, you are prohibited from making any withdrawals or transfers pending the final dissolution of the marriage. I'm also granting Ms. Chen temporary exclusive use of the residence, as the deed shows sole ownership predating the marriage." "Your Honor?" Richard Klein stood quickly. "Mr. Morrison has nowhere to go. He can stay with the co-worker he spent $30,000 on," the judge said dryly. "Temporary orders granted. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a full hearing on asset division. Anything else?" Victoria glanced at me and I nodded slightly. "Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to request expedited discovery, including phone records and emails between Mr. Morrison and Ms. Westbrook." "Granted. Mr. Klein, your client has 2 weeks to produce all requested documentation. This court is adjourned." As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt Daniel's eyes on me. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say to him. Outside, Victoria put a hand on my shoulder. "That went very well. The judge clearly sees this for what it is. What happens now?" "Now we wait for discovery." David's full report. "And we prepare for the final hearing." She paused. "There's also the matter of Emma Westbrook. I did some research on her position at the firm. And?" "She violated the firm's ethics policy by engaging in a relationship with a married colleague. If that information were to reach the managing partners, it could impact her employment." I thought about Emma, young and ambitious, probably believing she'd found true love with Daniel. Part of me felt sorry for her. A very small part. "Let me think about it," I said. Rachel took me to lunch after the hearing, to a quiet bistro where we could talk without being overheard. You were ice cold in there, she said, not entirely approvingly. Daniel looked devastated. Good. Nat, I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but be careful. Revenge has a way of consuming you. This isn't revenge. It's justice, is it though? Or is it you trying to control the one thing in your life that went completely out of control? I set down my fork. Are you taking his side now? Never. I just don't want you to lose yourself in this process. Daniel's not worth that. She was right, of course. I'd spent the past week obsessed with gathering evidence, building the case, planning my strategy. I'd barely slept, barely eaten, barely thought about anything except how to make Daniel pay for what he'd done. But sitting there in that bistro, watching people go about their normal lives, I realized something. Daniel had already paid. He'd lost his home, his access to money, his reputation. The divorce would be public record. Everyone in New York legal circles would know what he'd done. Was that enough? Or did I need to destroy him completely? My phone buzzed. An email from David Torres with the subject line, Final Report. I opened it, scanning quickly through pages of documentation. Phone records showing thousands of messages between Daniel and Emma. Credit card statements proving he'd been supporting their relationship with marital funds. And then, buried in the middle, something I hadn't expected. Emails between Daniel and Emma dating back 2 years. Long before she transferred to New York. Long before I left for Berlin. Long before our marriage started having problems, they'd been planning this. All of it. I showed Rachel the email. She read in silence, her expression darkening. Son of a bitch. He was cheating on you from the beginning. Not cheating exactly, but planning. Waiting. I scrolled through the messages, my hands shaking. Look at this one. From 18 months ago. Soon, babe. Just need to get my finances in order first. He married you for your money. Rachel looked up from the phone, horrified. Natalie, he married you for your money and your house and your connections, all while planning to leave you for Emma. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Our entire marriage had been a lie. Not just the last 3 months, but all of it. Every I love you, every plan we'd made, every moment I'd thought was real. I need to go, I said, standing abruptly. Nat, wait. But I was already leaving, pushing through the restaurant doors into the cold afternoon air. I walked without direction, blocks passing in a blur. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Victoria, from Rachel, from Marcus. I ignored them all. Eventually, I found myself in Central Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the lake. Couples walked by, holding hands, laughing, living lives that suddenly felt impossibly foreign. Had I ever been that naive? That trusting? My phone rang. Victoria Chen. I saw David's report, she said without preamble. This changes things. We're not looking at a simple divorce anymore. This is fraud. Can we prove it? The emails are pretty damning. Get my finances in order while he's living in your house, spending your money? A good attorney could argue he married you under false pretenses. What does that mean for the divorce? It means we go for everything. The house stays yours, obviously, but we can also argue that any claims he has to your income or assets during the marriage are void due to fraud. He gets nothing. The word echoed in my head. Daniel would leave our marriage with exactly what he brought into it. His law school debt and his mid-size car and his inability to be honest about anything. Do it, I said. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of legal preparation. Victoria worked with David's documentation to build a case that went beyond simple divorce to provable fraud. The emails between Daniel and Emma painted a damning picture of premeditation and deception. But something else was happening too. I started sleeping better, eating regular meals. The obsessive need for revenge was fading, replaced by something quieter. Acceptance, maybe, or just exhaustion. Marcus took me to dinner one evening at a small Italian place in the village. You look better, he observed. Less like you're planning a murder. I was never planning a murder. Could have fooled me. He sipped his wine. Victoria tells me the case is airtight. Daniel's attorney is already talking settlement. What kind of settlement? He walks away with nothing except his personal belongings and his car. No claims to the house, No portion of your savings. No alimony. Clean break. It was everything I'd wanted. Total victory. Daniel humiliated and financially ruined. So why did it feel hollow? There's something else, Marcus continued. Emma Westbrook resigned from the firm yesterday. Apparently, someone sent the managing partners a detailed account of her relationship with Daniel, including the ethics violations. I looked up sharply. I didn't do that. I know. Neither did Victoria or David. My guess? Someone at the firm who didn't appreciate the drama. He paused. She's apparently moving back to Boston. Career in New York pretty much over. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired. The final hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Daniel's attorney filed the settlement agreement, and Victoria reviewed it with me in her office. This is as good as it gets, she said. He admits fault, relinquishes all claims to marital assets, and agrees to pay your legal fees. You keep everything. What about the fraud claim? We could pursue it. Drag this out another 6 months, maybe a year. Put him through depositions and hearings and public humiliation. She looked at me carefully. But Natalie, ask yourself, what are you actually fighting for at this point? I thought about the past month. The sleepless nights, the constant anger, the obsessive documentation of every wrong Daniel had ever committed. I'd won. Completely and totally. He'd lost his home, his money, his reputation, his girlfriend. I just want it to be over, I said quietly. Victoria smiled. Then let's end it. The final hearing was brief and procedural. Daniel looked smaller somehow, diminished. He agreed to all terms without argument, his voice barely above a whisper when the judge asked if he understood what he was signing. Mr. Morrison, do you accept full responsibility for the dissolution of this marriage? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. And you agree to relinquish all claims to marital assets? Yes, Your Honor. Then, by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I hereby grant the dissolution of marriage between Natalie Chen and Daniel Morrison. This court is adjourned. Just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, Rachel hugged me tight. You did it. You won, did I, though? I looked back at the building where I'd just ended my marriage. I don't feel like I won anything. You got justice. You protected yourself. You made sure he couldn't do this to anyone else. She pulled back, studying my face. That's worth something. Maybe it was. Maybe justice and closure were the same thing, and I just couldn't see it yet. That evening, I stood in the brownstone that was officially, legally, completely mine. I walked through each room, seeing it differently now. Not as the home I'd shared with Daniel, but as something I'd built myself. Something that belonged only to me. My phone buzzed. A text from Hans in Berlin. Heard you're officially single now. Munich office still needs someone for 6 months. Interested? I looked around at the empty house, at the life I'd spent a month dismantling. I could stay here, rebuild, start over in the same place where everything had fallen apart, or I could leave. Take the Munich contract. See what life looked like when I wasn't defined by someone else's betrayal. I typed back, when do I start? 3 weeks later, I stood in that same hotel room where this had all begun, packing for Munich. Rachel sat on the bed, watching me fold clothes with the precision I brought to everything. You're really leaving, she said. 6 months, maybe longer if the project goes well. Running away or moving forward? Both, neither, does it matter? I zipped the suitcase. I spent a month fighting for justice, Rachel, and I got it. But it didn't make me feel whole again. Maybe distance will. Or maybe you'll just be alone in a different country. Maybe. But at least I'll be alone on my terms. My phone rang. Marcus. You at the airport yet? Leaving in an hour. Good. I wanted to tell you something before you go. He paused. Daniel came to see me yesterday. I stopped moving. Why? He wanted me to convince you to forgive him. Said he made a terrible mistake. That he realizes now what he lost. Marcus laughed without humor. I told him he didn't lose anything. He threw it away. There's a difference. What did he say? That he was sorry. That if he could go back and change things, he would. That Emma wasn't worth losing you. Another pause. For what it's worth, I think he means it. It's not worth anything. I picked up my suitcase. Sorry doesn't undo 3 months of lies, or 2 years of planning, or a marriage built on fraud. No, it doesn't. But Natalie, don't let what he did make you afraid to trust again. Don't let him take that from you, too. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed thinking about Marcus's words. Daniel had taken my marriage, my naivete, my belief that love was straightforward and honest. But he hadn't taken my strength. My intelligence, my ability to rebuild, those were mine. They'd always been mine. The car to the airport was waiting downstairs. I took one last look around the hotel room where I'd planned my revenge, executed my strategy, and won my war. It felt like a lifetime ago that I'd stood here, raw and broken and determined to make Daniel pay. He had paid, fully and completely, but more importantly, I'd learned something about myself. I was stronger than I'd known, smarter than I'd given myself credit for, capable of surviving the worst betrayal and coming out whole on the other side, not unscathed. The scars were there, would probably always be there, but scars were just proof that you'd survived something that tried to break you. And I had survived. Munich was waiting. A new office, new colleagues, new challenges, a life that belonged entirely to me, with no one to answer to and no one to disappoint. I picked up my suitcase and walked out of the hotel room without looking back. Because that was the final lesson Daniel had taught me, though he'd never intended to. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was simply refusing to let someone else's choices define your future. I was Natalie Chen, international consultant, survivor, and finally, gratefully, free. The revenge had been satisfying. The victory complete. But the freedom? That was everything. The end up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.